don't abide by laws, so they're not put out of existence, but they're given a place where they can take the consequences of their trying to become enjoyers, separate enjoyers. So they're provided a prison house. And then there's the three modes of nature. So those three, let's go through the purport again. It's not, there's more detailed presentations than this one, but Krishna's first expansion is Baladev, who expands as Sankarshan, and Sankarshan expands as Narayan. There's some other things. Narayan, the second Sankarshan, and from this second Sankarshan of the Vaikuntha realm, the Purusha avatars. And that's coming up in the next chapter, because it's one of the questions of the sages. Describe the avatars. So that's same is discussed again, chapter 3. The Purusha avatars, we know there's 3, and what Prabhupada is writing here in the purport is he just speaking of one of the 3, Shirodakshai Vishnu, or Paramatma. So, Karanadakshay Vishnu, Garbhadakshay Vishnu, Shirodakshay Vishnu, but he's just making a shortcut and just mentioning Paramatma. And the purpose, the function of Paramatma is to give sanction to the living entity's desires. And then the outcome, the responsibility, the culpability, if it's properly used, or blessings, if it's properly used, the mode of goodness, blessings, if it's properly used, free will. And then the living entity is placed under the care of different deities, the modes of nature deities. And they may get from those deities things that they wish to have, mode of passion things, mode of ignorance things, and even mode of goodness things. But of them, the main point here is all these different controllers, presiding deities, or ruling deities of the modes. Only one can give what is being spoken of in the verse, the ultimate benefit. Shreya Angsi, Shreyangsi, ultimate benefit. Prayas and Shreyas, short term, long term, and then Shreya Uttama, ultimate benefit from Vishnu. And that ultimate benefit, what's that? Being restored in the original position of Krishna consciousness. Then comes this nice understanding, Vaishnava understanding, that real liberation is not a place to go to. It's a consciousness place. And when consciousness is properly situated, then that living entity doesn't have a desire for moksha or liberation or termination of birth and death. Rather, the living entity desires only one thing: birth or no birth, service to the personality of Godhead. We had this nice discussion with a teenager in Potomac area. They were having a disagreement with a devotee. What is the aspiration for a Gaudiya Vaishnava? So it's very clear. Mama Janmani Jamanishwari Bhavatad Bhakti Rahaitaki Tui. Undivided devotional service. That's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching, because it's the Bhagavatam teaching, and it's the Gaudiya Vaishnava teaching because it's Lord Chaitanya's teaching. The aspiration for the termination of the problems of material life. There's so much mention of this. Jama Ritu Jaro Vyadi Dukkha Doshana Darshanam, birth, death, disease, and old age. Those are the real problems. Human life is meant to solve the real problems. We can't solve those problems on our own. We require Vishnu. Vishnu alone can bring us to the position where the problems are solved. But then, even the entities not Krishna conscious are bound by Prakriti, are bound by the laws of nature. And there is such a thing as not being bound by the laws of nature. And yet, if Krishna so desires, one can receive a body and serve Krishna in that position. But not desiring, let me out of this body, but desiring service. That's an essence point that's from the Gaudiya perspective or the Bhagavad perspective of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and the teachings of Shuddha Bhakti. So for those of us that are not on the plane of Shuddha Bhakti, we can aspire for Shuddha Bhakti, and by the encouragement of our acharyas and Prabhupada over and over again, the recommendation of wanting to go back home, back to Godhead, and then we circle around again. What does that mean? It can be a place or it can be consciousness. Just this morning I was hearing Prabhupada say, he was in Melbourne. The classic, this temple is not in Melbourne. It's Vaikuntha, and everyone went, Haribol, Haribol. It's not in Melbourne. If it's not in Melbourne, what is it? It's a place that's not in Melbourne. It's a place that's Vaikuntha because Krishna is at the center. And in the consciousness that Krishna is at the center, you're in the spiritual world. That's the back home, back to Godhead. The consciousness that Krishna is at the center. Not liberation from birth and death is at the center, but Krishna is at the center. It's subtle, and on the other hand, it's very fundamental. Repeated muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavastiti. That's the Bhagavatam statement of what liberation is. And in describing the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, mukti is one of the 10 topics, and that's the definition of what mukti means. Swarupa, one's spiritual form. Engaging in one's spiritual form, in the service of the Supreme Spirit, Supreme Person. And there's no indication that moksha, by that definition, means no more material body. It can mean that. It doesn't have to mean that. It means, what it does mean is in one's spiritual form. That is to say, is it possible that one has a covering, but within the covering there's a spiritual form, and my consciousness is I'm engaged in service to the personality of Godhead in my spiritual form. Just a little sub point here, and I'm going to close up. In anticipation of speaking on Madhurya Kandamati, both for China and for the US, I've spent some time going over the biography of the author. Madhurya Kandamati's author is Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur. And Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur was very strong, following Rupa Goswami, very strong on the transcendentalness of Radha Krishna loving relationship, parakya, outside of marriage, and how it's transcendental, fully transcendental. And he wrote about it extensively, and he's, very powerful acharya, and there were some people in Braja at the time that didn't like it. And they didn't like it so much, the pundits decided to have him killed. You risk your life when you make strong statements on topics that are controversial, and he did it. So their plan was every day Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his mature years, would engage in Vrindavan Parikrama. He didn't go on a yatra with, hundreds of people. Part of his daily activity was Vrindavan Parikrama. It doesn't say where in Vrindavan. It doesn't say Govardhan Parikrama, but some place in Vrindavan. So as he was going, the Pandits and the Gundas, the men that they had hired or had engaged in attempting to kill Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, they saw him moving on his parikrama, morning parikrama. And so they moved in on him quickly and suddenly disappeared. Just poof, he just disappeared. And then down the road a little bit, there was a very beautiful young gopi. And so they spoke very sweetly to the young gopi. Have you seen this elderly Vaishnava, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur? Do you know who he is? Have you seen him? And she said, I'm a servant of Radharani, and I'm here engaged in gathering flowers to make garlands and offerings to Radharani. So I can't say where he's gone. And they spoke sweetly to her because they wanted information. She spoke sweetly to them because she was a transcendentalist. And then in a few moments, poof, she just disappeared and turned into Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And then they realized that they were they were in big trouble. They're very wrong, planning to murder such an elevated personality. So while doing his Vrindavan Parikrama, consciousness was in his spiritual form. Swarupena Vyavastati, situated in his Swarup, doing external this and that with the body and mind, but internal absorption in his spiritual identity. So quite mystical. And it's not one place it's mentioned in many places as just a core part of his biography. When he's writing commentaries, that's the place from which he's writing. And externally using his mind and senses, making reference to scripture, using logic and reason, and, engaging the material energy in various ways. But it's from the platform of spiritual realization. And that's what is being spoken of, the ultimate benefit. Now, it's mentioned here because specifically one can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form of the quality of goodness. But the form of the quality of goodness has its transcendental beyond goodness dimension. That, in other words, there are persons who worship Vishnu who they aspire for benefits from the mode of goodness and become situated in the mode of goodness. And so Vishnu, Paramatma, may supply that. And their destination is not back home, back to Godhead, necessarily. But the ultimate benefit that Vishnu may bestow is Krishna consciousness or Vishnu consciousness or total absorption in the personality of Godhead without any tinge of contact with the modes of nature. One other little point I want to mention, and this interesting language that Prabhupada is using, just like in the previous verse, he is using this term integrated forms and separated forms. I'll read the sentence. This is halfway down the purport. The pure transcendentalists worship the form of goodness, Vishnu, in his various forms. Vishnu is manifested by his millions and billions of integrated forms and separated forms. So integrated forms means Vishnu Tattva expansions. And the separated forms mean the living entities. That's specified in the next sentence. The integrated forms are called Godhead, and the separated forms are called the living entities or the jivas. So integrated forms and separated forms. It's not common language that Prabhupada used consistently throughout the Bhaktivedanta purports, but here, this first canto, sitting in his rooms in the Radha Damodar temple, he's addressing an audience that doesn't know any of this and using language that they can relate to or begin to relate to. Integrated forms and separated forms. Integrated and separated. So Vishnu forms are the forms of Godhead, or Bhagavan, or Vishnu Tattva, integrated forms. And there's this exchange between integrated forms and the separated forms. And the proper exchange, there's the material exchange where there's sanction for what the living entities, guna and karma and their desires, and then thus different situations, different types of worship mentioned in the Vedas to achieve this and that and the other thing. Dealing with the modes of nature. And then there's that which goes beyond the modes of material nature. And that depends upon the living entity's desire. And then there's reciprocation with their desires. But the ultimate benefit, that means the ultimate benefit, but the ultimate benefit is being once again connected or reconnected with the integrated. So that the fullness of the capacity of the separated becomes like qualitatively like the integrated, although very tiny. Spiritual quality becomes rejuvenated. Like the classic example, taking a spark that has left the fire and becomes just a little piece of carbon, bring it back in the fire, its fiery nature is restored by bringing it in contact with the fire. So that's what's being spoken of in this verse. See if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. We're looking at the verse, and I want to share some reflections. I think the first part was talking about the transcendental personality of Godhead is indirectly associated with the three modes of material nature. And I think this is important because the material nature cannot function independently without the Lord's interference.
Right.
Otherwise, they will stay dormant and there will be no activities at all.
Right.
And later it says, for the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material world, the Lord accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And I think that word accepts, Sanskrit word is dhate, is interesting because it indicates that although these forms are in association of their material worlds, but they're still the form of the Supreme. They're still like you can say it's the avatar, or in other words, it's the avatar of the Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yes, Guna Avatar.
Yeah, and then it says the last part of the verse is that of the three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu. And it said, and Vishnu is characterized as the form of the quality of goodness. I think, just as you have explained very lengthy in your lecture, that Vishnu is, although he is the presiding deity of the mode of goodness, but he does not accept body in the sattva guna. His body is transcendental.
Mm.
And I think we, as Gaudiya Vaishnava, you also explained, we, although all these three are avatars of the Lord, but we don't necessarily independently worship Brahma and Shiva, just as we don't worship Lord Buddha, although Buddha is also an avatar of the Lord. Yeah, this is with regard to the verse.
All good points.
And I think there is something, this verse also reminded me of another one from Brahma Samhita, when it is said, Mahavishnu create Lord Brahma from his right hand, create Lord Vishnu from his left hand, and from within his eyebrow he creates Lord Shiva for the material manifestation. And it, and I think I'm trying to say, like, in this verse, the Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, are they also referring to this set of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva uh, prior to their entering into each of the universe?
It doesn't say. My sense is it's indicating as they enter into the universe. In other words, they're performing their function in the universe. So the reference is this, the context of the verse is how to become free from those modes. And so it's speaking of their function within the universe, not before they enter the universe. That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. And although they're the avatar, I think they're also, like, when we are looking at a verse from Sri Brahma Samhita, it's like when there are commentaries saying that they're also Brahma, Shiva, Brahma and Shiva in the spiritual sky, not just as a avatar of the Lord Vishnu.
Right. That's Brahma Samhita. That's an unusual understanding, or I see, just a second. It's an unusual concept. It's not, it's not a commonly discussed concept, but it's a proper concept. It's right in Brahma Samhita, and therefore we should understand. That is, say the same thing in a different way. As above, so below. What's existing within the material creation has its spiritual counterpart. And because there's a spiritual counterpart, there's a function within the material creation corresponding to that spiritual counterpart.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Vishwanath
Little further away.
Yeah.
Further away. Yes.
Vishwanath Chakravarti pastime you just mentioned. Was he a direct disciple of Rupa Goswami?
No.
Okay.
No.
And are there any more pastimes or any his works, books, anything he's written?
Oh. Yes. I'll send you a PDF that has the list of his works. Many. It's a detail. But when he was still a Sanskrit student in school, he had written 3 commentaries of his books that later became his, ascribed to him, but it wasn't his own composition. It was commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Ujjwala Nilamani when he's still a kid in school. So the list is long. Many of his writings are commentaries. Some of them are original. Very exceptional person. But that's an answer to your question. Prolific.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Is that the battery charger? Okay. Just set it down. I can return yours. Here's yours. Come, I want to give you something else too. See this? Back to Godhead magazine. Do you have a scanner or access to a scanner? There's one painting I'd like scanned. Two. This one? Yes. That's page 6. Should have marked page. Page 44. 6 and 44.